When you start looking at a 7-bay Rackmount NAS, the first thing that pops into my head is the kind of decision you're really making. You're either gearing up for a small office that needs a solid, always-in-storage backbone, or you're a hobbyist who wants a SATA 4-bit media vault that can also handle a handful of VM workloads. It's easy to get distracted by the headline numbers 7 bays, Intel Atom, 2.5 GB, and then end up buying something that either overdelivers for a simple home use case or underdelivers when you need true enterprise-grade reliability. That's why I'm going to walk through the QNAP h765eU 8G and try to make it clear who will actually get their money's worth and who might be better off looking elsewhere. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the physical layout. This unit is a 1U chassis, which means it slides right into a standard 19-inch rack without taking up a lot of vertical space. The short-depth design is purposely built for data centers or office closets where every inch counts. Inside, you get 7 drive bays that each accept either a 2.5-inch SSD or a 3.5-inch HDD, and they're all hot swap. In practice, that means you can start with, say, 4 TB NAS-grade HDDs for bulk storage, and later add 2.5-inch SSDs for a fast cache tier without ever powering down the box. The extra 2 bays are perfect for future expansion or for dedicating a couple of drives to a separate h765eU for a virtual machine host. Now, the processor. QNAP chose the Intel Atom X7405C, a 4-core chip that clocks up to 3.4 GHz. It's not a Xeon, but it's a solid middle ground for a small to medium business that needs to run a few services, think file sharing, basic surveillance recording, maybe a light Docker container for a web app. I've seen the same CPU in a handful of other 1U NAS models, and users consistently report that it handles mixed workloads without choking. That said, if you plan to run heavy transcoding or multiple VMs with high CPU demand, you'll start to feel the limits. The key takeaway is, this NAS is built for balanced, not bursty, workloads. Memory is where QNAP starts to differentiate itself. The base model ships with 8 GB of DDR5 SATA, and there's a single slot that can be upgraded to 16 GB. The in-band ECC feature is a nice safety net. It can correct single-bit errors on the fly, which is something you usually only see in more expensive server-grade machines. In everyday use, you probably won't notice ECC unless you run a database that's sensitive to corruption. Still, it's a confidence-boosting detail for anyone who cares about data integrity, especially when you're dealing with critical business files. Networking is another practical point. The h765eU 8G comes with two 2.5 GB ports, each of which can fall back to 1 GB, 100 megabits per second, or even 10 megabits per second for older equipment. In a real-world office, that means you can bond the 2 ports for up to 5 gigabits per second of aggregate bandwidth, which is plenty for most file-sharing scenarios. If your infrastructure already has a 2.5 GB switch, you'll see a tangible speed boost when copying large video files or backing up a workstation. If you're still on a 1 GB network, the second port simply gives you redundancy. The NAS can keep serving files if one cable fails. So, who should buy this? If you run a small creative studio, a law firm, or any team that needs reliable, centralized storage with a bit of extra flexibility, the h765eU 8G is a strong candidate. Its hot swap bays make drive replacement painless, the upgradable memory and ACC give you some peace of mind for critical data, and the dual 2.5 GB ports provide both performance and redundancy. It also shines for home users who are serious about building a personal media server that can stream 4K content to multiple devices while still having enough headroom for some light Docker services. On the flip side, you should skip this model if your primary need is raw compute power or heavy virtualization. The Atom CPU, while efficient, won't keep up with a workload that demands multiple simultaneous transcoding streams or a cluster of VMs. In that case, you'd be better off looking at a QNAP Rackmount that sports an Intel Xeon or AMD Ryzen processor, even if it means paying a premium. Also, if you're a pure home user who only needs a couple of drives for backup, the 7-bay form factor might be overkill. A 2-bay desktop NAS would be cheaper and still meet your needs. Let's dig into a few practical strengths. First, the hot swap capability combined with QNAP's QTS operating system means you can set up RAID 5 or RAID 6, and if a drive fails, you replace it and the system rebuilds in the background. I've seen users report rebuild times of around 6 to 8 hours for a full 4 TB drive at typical load, not instantaneous, but it keeps the array available. Second, the ability to mix SSDs and HDDs in the same chassis means you can,